All right, and we should be live now. So, good evening,
Okay.
everyone. Welcome to our resume and interviewing workshop tonight. Make sure I'm clicking things on the right screen. Maybe. There we go. So, for those of you not familiar with the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, or the Central Florida section, AIAA, as we call it, is the largest professional organization in the aerospace industry. Everybody from students to professionals to CEOs and astronauts can be members that's involved in the aerospace industry. And here at the Central Florida section, we have many members from professionals, students, and local educators to serve the aerospace community in our area. On the map on the screen, we have all the counties that are part of Central Florida section, including our two student branches at UCF and UF. One of the big misconceptions I see a lot is people think that we're the professional branch of AIAA, when in reality, we're the section that covers this whole area. So if you're a student member, you're automatically a member of our section, and we'd love to have you at our events. We're always open to suggestions if there's anything we can do to serve our student members better. So make sure you're on the email list and join our Facebook page and keep up with what we got going on. A lot of the events, we do a lot of networking events back when we can do things in person, as well as speakers and workshops like this. We also have monthly council meetings, which are always open. So if you're interested in getting more involved, you don't need to be a professional to attend. Just let us know. We can send you an invite. We also are always looking for volunteers if you're interested in getting more involved with AIAA at the local level here. Currently looking for people like social media and communications, public policy, young professionals, and people to help out with different events we want to have going on soon. Once we can get back to doing events in person, we definitely want to start doing a lot more of those and have some great ideas. So if you have any good ideas for stuff going on, be sure to let us know. Um, so the of upcoming events we have now, November 12th at 7 p.m., Gene Fleeman will be talking about missile design, development, and systems engineering. He does this speech a lot, and it's really great. He literally wrote the book on the subject, so it's going to be a great presentation. Whether you work in the missile industry or not, if you're just interested in learning more about them and how they work, it's a great place to learn that. We'll also be helping out with the SECME glider competition, the regional competition for that, hosted at UCF. So we're going to be judging that competition, which is for elementary, middle, and high school kids that are going to come and take on one of their first engineering challenges, building a glider to carry marbles through a course and competing. So we will be looking for some volunteer judges to help us out with that in February. So we'll send out some more information probably in early January when we know more about whether the event's happening in person for sure and how many people we're going to need, depending on what all goes on to make sure that we can do it safely. Um, Also coming up is going to be the Ascend Forum, which is a national event. It's replaced the Space Forum for AIAA this year. So this is going to be the first version of the Ascend module, which is spelled incorrectly on my thing. It's Ascend, not Ascent. That's coming up November 16th through 18th, and it's going to be virtual, which means it's actually affordable for most people. A lot of years it's in person, you got to fly out somewhere, but it's going to be all online, all recorded, so you can check it out in the middle of the day. That's going to be the 16th through 18th, and it's at ascend.events. So that's going to be a really cool first time event for AIAA. For the students online, we also have our scholarship applications open now. So we provide a $500 scholarship that you can apply for. It is open to AIAA student members that have been members for at least 1 year, and you have to be a current student at UCF or UF in the Central Florida section. It's going to be due at the end of the year, and we'll let you know and distribute the scholarship in the spring. So you can contact us at aiaa.central.fl@gmail.com or contact your local UF or UCF student branch. They should have the applications and can help you out with that as well. So that is all I have tonight. We are kind of simulcasting tonight's event on both Zoom and our YouTube live stream. So if you're on Zoom and you have questions later in the event, feel free to unmute and ask the question here. If you're on YouTube, you can use the YouTube live chat. We'll be monitoring that and reading out the questions so you can still participate as well. This is being recorded and will be on our YouTube, just for your information, including all the video and voice on Zoom tonight. So thank you everybody for joining us, and hand you over to Walter Hammond, who's going to begin our uh, resume workshop. Sorry, starting with.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Walter Hammond. I'm retired from NASA. I have also worked in the aerospace industry for a number of years, 4+ decades, and have also worked in the military. I'm a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel and flew aircraft B 52 C 130 and also did a lot of intelligence work and I ended my Air Force career working at the Pentagon for the prestigious Air Force Scientific Advisory Board, which is an advisory body that provides sound scientific advice to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. What I'd like to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about resumes, and I would like to start by sharing my screen, which is here. And if this works, I'm going to start off with how you do a resume. Well, first of all, cover letters for resumes. A good friend of mine, Jim Ashworth, he's a senior partner with Joseph Michaels, provided me some very valuable material. Cover letters are good, but be aware that the average employer will only give a resume between 4 to 6 seconds of attention. And I've gotten that from several sources. That is not that is a pretty good. When you've got a stack of resumes, you got to have attention grabbers. So what I've been told is, if you take the first part of your resume, this is called the folded top half. You need to put something attention grabbing in that first part, because that's going to be what they're going to look at first. And if you can do that and grab their attention, then you've got a chance of being in the pile that is look at later pile, versus being in the reject pile of resumes when a potential employer is perusing your qualifications for a job. Okay, so as I'm showing on the screen, you can do a cover letter to introduce yourself. This a good thing is to maybe break it into 3 short paragraphs. Tell why you are contacting your employer. You need to have like some almost like bullet points in doing a cover letter for a resume. Why are you a fit for their position? Obviously, it's important that you are actually a fit. This is where you got to do your research. Don't prepare a resume. It is almost not advisable to just blanket the world with your resumes and expect to get a lot of job interviews or some response. You have to target your resume for a specific job opening, a specific opportunity, usually with a specific company. So how do you do that? You research the company. What are their openings? What are you best qualified for? Look over where they're seeking, where they have openings and where you are a fit. And that's what you put in the second paragraph of your cover letter. You say, why are you a fit? And keep it short, maybe just a sentence. It can be a kind of a several line sentence, fill up a paragraph. The third paragraph can be a call to action, asking them to interview you. If you have questions about my qualifications, which implies you're not a fit, should never be used. So it's better just to say, I look forward to discussing my qualifications, and always state it in terms of what you can do for them, not what they can do for you. You don't want to say, well, I'm the best financial analyst that you've ever run across, and I want you to employ me. It's more like, oh, I see that your company has an opening for a senior level accountant that has experience in using this particular kind of accounting software. Well, I have experience in that, and I think I'd be a great fit to help you achieve your organizational goals in your company. And by the way, don't say your company, say, Jacobs Engineering or whatever the company might be. When you review, then paragraph 2 is verbatim, and he says, when you review my qualifications, you'll find I meet the requirements of my position. I don't know if I just say it naturally, and you want to end up with a positive, always end with a positive statement like this. I look forward to an interview with your company. Now, if you secure an interview, which is one of the main goals of your resume, you want to be sure and thank the employer. Send them a thank you note. Now, it used to be you mail them. Now you send a very nicely worded email typically to that employer, thanking him in person by name for that employment opportunity. Okay, I don't know how many of you out there listening are students versus young professionals versus senior professionals looking for a job. I'm going to start out with let's start with a senior professional. Let's see. maybe this. So, so this is a senior professional. Uh, this person is highly qualified. Now you notice the first thing he puts in, he's an expert in planning, organizing, and managing resources through to successful project completion. So if I'm an employer, I'm going to be looking at this first potential employer. I'm going to look. Oh, I see that he's, so you better tailor or make sure that this top part of your resume speaks to the specific qualifications of the organization you're interviewing for. And always research the company. Get in there and do web searches. Now with the internet, you can do a very good job of thoroughly investigating, perhaps even going on social media and finding out what other employees are saying about the company. Um, get on blogs and find out. You may, in doing this, may find out you're not a fit for that company, or that you really would rather not work for them, and it'll be saving your time and not wasting their time by not interviewing with a company that will not be a good fit for your experience and qualifications. So in this case, this person puts he puts this, the first paragraph is what they're going to read, and maybe get into skills and expertise. So you're looking, you see how he split it into the top part. So you have to make it through this top part, and then if you pass, hopefully he would say, oh, well, this guy looks like, yeah, looks like he's got client relationship experience, quality control. Let's look at the rest of his resume. So they typically will eyeball the rest of the resume like this. Now notice here, let me kind of, when you're looking at somebody's resume, so he says, look at the bottom here. It says, ensure effectively communicate project status, right? Ensure business objectives are met through business development, customer relationship, managing multiple projects of size and importance totaling over $4.5 million in value. Selected accomplishments. Picked as the preferred project manager for a $400,000 project. Assumed existing customer accounts to renew client relationships and successfully restore confidence in the company's ability to perform. Pioneered. Use action words like this. Pioneered. Assumed. If you look over here, lead engineering teams and development efforts to meet customer requirements and cost constraints. Evaluate. So always use verbs. It's better to be active rather than passive. Don't say led, but say lead. Don't say evaluated, but evaluate and manage. That's an active verb, see? Develop USB I/O board. So you manage acceptance testing programs for all major engineering, simultaneously supporting up to 7 projects like that. And then selected accomplishments. So you notice how he's peppering his resume with selected accomplishments at every step, so that for every bullet that he has, every job that he has, these are the things that he's made a difference. And an employer looking at these things, they're going to say, oh, gee, he did that for company XYZ. In this case, whatever company, is involved here, maybe he could probably has more experience now. He can do the same thing for us. Now, typically, you put your education after your work experience. Now, there's something, if there's senior professionals out there that are listening, you don't want to put, like say I was doing my resume, I'm not going to put that I graduated from high school in 1966. Why? Because that ages me. So in this case, this professional, could put the degree. You always put the degree that you got, master's of business. You don't put Rollins College, you put the degree that you have. Yeah, it was at Rollins College, but it was an MBA from an accredited university. BS Aerospace Engineering happened to be from the University of Central Florida, so do not put the university you went to ahead of the degree. Put the degree first. You can typically, I've seen most of the time, you can put the date the degree was received after the name of the degree. Here's your quals, licensed professional engineer. a vice chair and membership officer of an organization. Um, and it's very important to put the technical skills that you have. Um, it's a matter of taste. Oh, when you're doing your resume, there are no rules, just write. You've heard the saying when you go to, I think it's, there's some restaurant that says, we don't have any rules, just write. There's no rules for a resume. There's no ground rule that say you have to have a certain format. There's no ground rules that say you have to have your education ahead of your experience. There's no rules that say you got to put a thing like that, like this expert in planning. Your objective in your resume is to land a position. It's to land an interview. I'm sorry, to land an interview. That's your objective. It's not to land a position. The next speaker is going to talk to you about how to turn an interview into an offer. But right now, your objective is to get a position, an interview with the company. One of the things that you should keep in mind is typically when you get to the interviewing stage, you're only competing against 2 or 3, maybe 3 people, at most 4. So there is a big down selection process from the big pile of resumes to the smaller pile that they'll look at more thoroughly, where they actually will go through all these lower things, and then to the select pile of 3, 4, 5 candidates who actually be invited in for an interview. And each one of these steps is, it's a way to have your resume not make the cut. Okay, next for the younger people, I'm going to show you some young, and these are quite impressive. I was very impressed. Let me start with this one. Well, let me start with this one. This is another professional. This is not a student, but this is, maybe not as well laid out. He does have a summary, which is good. He holds a clearance. So keep in mind who your audience is. If this is for an aerospace position, typically they do look more. In other words, this guy isn't trying to land a sales job at some company where you got to, be flashy. This is a good engineer who's trying to advertise his skills, and so here he's put down his. See here, led. Let me focus a little bit here. Led $110,000 business captures for new battery test. That's one of. If I was an employer, that's one of the first things I noticed. Oh, he captured $110,000 business capture for a new console. Oh, okay. Again, action verbs: executed, conducted, authored, assigned as lead engineer. Okay, here's one. Military. So those of you that have military experience, such as myself, you would put, led a 6-man space command and control team, synchronized joint tactical special ops. This is a very powerful, just on the face of it, is a very powerful military resume. And military experience does count. It matters, especially if you have things like this that are standout accomplishments. Awards and recs, I have not addressed that, but you can I put awards and recognitions in my resumes, but always towards the back, as shown here. That's a good spot for those. So these, and then his education. Now notice that he puts the degree, the specialty, and it just happens to be from Embry-Riddle in May 2010. For engineering positions, you can put a research topic that could be germane. He's did a research topic for his bachelor's as well as master's degree. So like that. Okay, so that's another example of a professional resume. Now let's look at some examples of student resumes. If I can find one here. Okay, now this is a student. This is an actual student who was intending to graduate. This is back in May 2020, so this resume was current over a year ago. in 2021 you would put May 2021, but this person had put out his resume. You notice it has an educational email. So he put his education first with his grade point averages and other schools that he's attended with a grade point average. Then the first question you should be asking, gee, what if my grade point is only 3 point, what if it's 2.5? Well, don't put it on there if it's a 2.5 and you don't want to show it. If it's a decent one like this, put it on there. So you notice now, this is a student, but he's already got all this work experience. And he was a senior at the time this resume was current in UCF, University of Central Florida. Notice how he puts his technical skills there immediately below technical accomplishments. Look at that. Now this is a student. He's ATV part manufacturing, design part for water cooling from ATV, designed and built an internal air-cooled internal combustion engine, removed and replaced. So this guy made the dean's list and the president's list. If you put down things that mean something, many of you that are students won't have made the dean's list, or may perhaps not made the president's list. We'll just leave it off. But maybe you were a member of Tau Beta Pi or some honor society. We'll put that in there as a honorary society membership at the bottom of your resume. You also notice this is a one-pager. Students typically, there's actually no, remember I said there's no rules, just write. Does it have to be one page? It depends. I could never put my resume in one page because I've got too much experience. But a student, notice how he's captured everything an potential employer probably needs to see in one page. And that would be a good example to follow for you young professionals or students that are trying to land a position. All right, I'm going to open up another resume right here. Okay, now this, again, believe it or not, this is an actual student. He put a summary of his, which is good. So remember what I told you, it's the top half of the resume is what counts. So you better make every word in here in this top part count. This was a very capable student. So you put your first name, you always put your name, your street address, your zip code, phone number, email address. The street address is actually optional. That used to be pretty important. It's of less importance now. I usually put my street address on my resume. You must put your phone, you must put your email address. I've got another resume where a student that I'm going to show you in a minute where he's actually had a web page, and that'll be really interesting to put that on there. So here he put his education, and then look at all this experience that he has as a student. Plus he's done research, and he's been a leader. This student participated as senior multi-vehicle integrated system lead. Well, and this is the things he did for that project. So he's actually putting, notice how he couched it as a leadership, instead of just saying, oh, well, I was a member of a team and, occasionally contributed. No, he led a team. He used Agile. Now, I would have said he designed a parent vehicle using, and then organized and led a group, integrated software swarm. Then he's also a founder of an organization on campus. And these are the things he did for that organization. And then he's also a member of AIAA, which is the sponsor of this presentation that we're doing for you tonight. But again, I want to emphasize, if you're a student and you have any kind of college work experience program like this guy did, that gets, and he even had a secret job secret clearance to work on, oops, that's a typo. Oh, that reminds me, don't have typos in your resume. Have someone else, have your wife or your girlfriend or a trusted colleague read your resume, perhaps even read it out loud and see what it sounds like, and certainly catch any typos, mispronunciations, or things that would embarrass you. So anyway, so there's that. So what typically your format is, you put the employer and the date. Employer, date. Employer, position, date. Put a clearance level if it's important. If you have a security clearance, you want to put it in there. All right, I got one more resume to show you. Let's see, from a student, if I can find it. Let's see. Bear with me. I'm looking through my pile of resumes here.
So I don't want to interrupt your presentation, but just a
Yeah,
quick
go ahead.
note. I do know somebody who had applied for many jobs after graduation from college. And we graduated about the same time. He just could not get a call back. And he had me look at his resume after I had gotten a job. And turns out he spelled engineering wrong on his degree. So the automatic filters had never shown his resume to a real person. They said, oh, well, he doesn't have an engineering degree. He has an engineering degree. And he never got a single call and then immediately got multiple, at least emails or calls back after fixing that one mistake on his resume. So please be very careful with the spelling on your resume because a lot of companies these days are using computers and they don't know that that's an easy typo. They just filter for the word that somebody selected.
Right. Okay. Let me see. Thank you for that. And by the way, that brings to mind another thing. Typos. When your employers are getting smarter, and it used to be what people would do that were looking for a position would be they would copy every job requirement that position had and sprinkle it, put it in their resume like all in one place. And employers were getting smart to that and catching up with that and not. Um, but what's recommended is that you do sprinkle some keywords throughout your resume uh, that reflect what the position opening has. This is kind of like another. This is like a sort of a more simple resume for a person that maybe has a bachelor's degree. So you put your skills, professional experience. So I've seen a lot of resumes that they'll put as experience. So what do you do if you don't have any professional experience? Well, then do what the other students are doing. Put down projects that you've done, like this one here, where see, so he's got senior design project. These are things he's done, fabricated in design. So this person had basically no experience whatsoever. Well, excuse me, he did have. He was an engineering intern. So he put that, you could probably, I would put that, you probably want to put that ahead of projects. And you certainly want to have skills like that you've learned. So no matter what your experience is, so if you've only worked at McDonald's to put yourself through school, I would suggest you couch it in such a way like um, you were a server at McDonald's and waited tables or something like that. Just put down that you worked at McDonald's in order to get yourself through school. So you were holding a job while at the same time uh, going full time in school, and that it shows that you're a good worker. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron now, who's going to talk about. Let's see if I got anything else. I'm going to lead to Aaron's with some things about phone interviews. Aaron, I'm going to hand it over to you in just a minute. I'm still sharing my screen. So this is my friend again, Jim Ashworth, talked about the goal of phone interviews is to get a face-to-face interview. So really, I have had phone interviews before. In fact, one time I had a phone interview that ended up being a position, and I worked for that company for years and had a successful phone interview. So these are some go-bys for that. They will likely use 4 to 5 phone interviews to narrow the field. These are some things you want to do prior. Prepare a checklist of do your research, do your homework. Make sure you're prepared with a pen, pad, and resume. Don't have interruptions like you don't have your phone ringing and interrupt basically when somebody's interviewing. Turn off the call waiting feature. Dress as if you were going to a face-to-face interview. In fact, that's people who have phone interviews even without having it be face-to-face. Now, when you have a phone interview, it probably is going to be face-to-face. You certainly want to have a suit, coat, and tie if it's a professional position, most likely. A good posture, and by the way, a good background too. Like you notice my background, it's a good office background. You don't want to be having your background be a kitchen, for example, or something like that. Be an expert listener. That's another thing. And I think Aaron's going to get into the importance of listening. You want to listen more than you talk. It's tempting to say how great you are and how wonderful you are, but you really need to be an expert listener, and then set the stage for a follow-on face-to-face. Okay, so Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you for how to get to the next phase, assuming they've made the cut and have a powerhouse resume that gets them in the front door for an interview. Then what do they do after that? Aaron Blevins is a good colleague. I've known him for years, and so here we go, Aaron. I'm going to stop share.
Thank you, Walter. Let me start off with a little bit about me. You got to see my resume there, Walter shared. So started out graduate UCF, bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering. Worked in the professional field for, I guess, about 4 or 5 years. 2-3 years into it, realized that I knew management was my future. I always wanted to own my own company. And so in order to do that, I started looking for things that would gain those skills. Went back, got an MBA from Rollins. Let's see, we graduated Rollins 2010. Served in a couple senior management roles with Matters Industries and project management, engineering management, director of research and development, stuff like that. So a lot of broad-based experience with that company. And then 2014 broke off, did some engineering consulting, and then started a small engineering manufacturing company here locally. So we build training simulation devices for the military, complete in-house engineering design, fabrication, fully integrated shop. So been loving it ever since. And if you decide that not having a life is for you, go start a business. So all right, so thank you, Walter. Let's launch into this. So congratulations, you've passed the first barrier into getting a position. You've got your resume out there reviewed. It passed the HR manager, or the person who's doing the filters of the resumes. It's gone to the hiring manager, and they said, yeah, let's bring that guy in. I want to talk to him. So you get the call or the email or the letter or whatever it may be. At that point in time, that's when your interview starts. It's that first contact after they've received your resume and they decided that they want to move forward. So any communications that you have with the company, every single one of those is going to affect their decision. I mean, it's telling them about you, how professionally you act, how you behave, and also sort of what to expect when you come on as an employee if they would choose to hire you. So once you get the notification, normally you're going to do some preliminary research into the company when you first do your resume and you're applying to the job, because you want to make sure it's something that you're going to be interested in. You're going to be in a position that you can succeed for the employer. But at this point, you're going to want to dive deeper. You're going to want to know a lot more about the company, look at the company history, do social media research, go to Facebook, go to LinkedIn, look at who works there, who are the employees, what do these employees do, and you can actually, with when I first started looking at positions and stuff, and it wasn't as prolific as it is now, but now you could actually go out and search and find, potentially even find the person that's going to be interviewing you out on social media and learn a quite good deal about them. Um, and so, you know, there's, obviously there's a fine line here. You don't want to get to the point where you're like, yeah, I saw your Facebook post and saw what you did last weekend. Those fish were some pretty big fish you caught. There's borderline of stalking, as well as making sure that you're prepared. So keep it work related. Focus on the business. Focus on the employees' contributions to the business, and that way you can kind of frame your target audience uh, to be able to sell yourself professionally. So the second thing, after you've done the research on the company, you know everything there is about it. You're an expert at that point, because this could potentially lead to a career. Um, you may end up staying with this employer for the next 10 years, and so you're going to want to know as much as you can before you make that commitment or that decision to move forward, because they will affect your professional life from this point on after accepting that position. Um, so you've researched the company, the job posting. This is very important. You want to go through and make sure you know what job you're uh, applying to and what you're actually going to be interviewed on. You don't want, because I'm sure you've applied to 10, 15 different positions, and you certainly don't want to go up and start talking about um, you know spaceships design and find out that you're sitting in the office of Cessna and actually looking to get a position designing aircraft. Um, so I'm going to share, and actually I just went through a cycle where we interviewed, me, um, several engineering students for an engineering intern position. And so if I can figure this out, I'm going to share the job posting. We can kind of look at it and phrase, move this over here. All right, can you guys see that, or you see my notes?
Yeah.
Is that better? Okay. Um, all right, so looking through this, you can kind of understand what the employer is looking for. Um, you know, Typically they'll put out specific skills, job duties, what they're going to be expecting in a position. But you also have to read between the lines. Looking at some of the type of things, you can say, okay, what from this job description, what can I see? Where are their pain points? Because anytime an employer is hiring somebody, they're trying to solve a problem, and you want to be the solution to that problem. Um, so keep it in that frame of reference, looking over the job description and understanding exactly what they're asking for. Let's see here. Um, Job duties, understand, read those, make sure you are interested in them. Well, you should have done that before you even applied to the position. But you want to go back over them and make sure that you have a talking point during the interview to address every single one of these duties, of how either your experience in the past has been in support of those duties. And same thing with the skills and qualifications. Talk about your training, talk about your education, specific classes, and what work experiences that you have had that give you those skills and qualifications that allow you to meet those expectations and needs of your future employer. Um, they may not come up. You may have an open opportunity during the interview to discuss some of those things, but you need to go through, and this is part of the preparation element, is making sure you're going through and reviewing all of these components so you have talking points to all of them. I would say probably 90% of the time you're going to start off with a phone interview or a Zoom interview. This is a good opportunity to have these notes sitting in front of you available for quick reference. Do a practice interview with a friend and use those notes so that you can reference them quickly, you know where everything is, and you can get to the information that you need in a timely manner, so it doesn't seem like you're trying to search for an answer or that you're unprepared or that you don't know. Because remember, you're at this point you're on a stage and you're being evaluated to see if you will be a good fit for the company. So employers they really want to know, a couple things about you. One is, are you able to do the job? Do you have the skills and qualifications, or are you trainable to do the job that they're hiring and posting for? And then secondly, and oftentimes most importantly, they're going to want to know what type of person you are and how your personality is going to fit within the team, the organization, the group. And so, it's just like going on a first date or a blind date. When you're bringing people in and you're talking with them, you're trying to fill them out, understand, see who they are truly, because everyone has this. They've got their salesman suit on, and so you want to be genuine and authentic as much as you can. Um, and I would just say keep it in a frame of reference of, like I said before, you're solving a problem for the employer when you're coming in as an employee, and when you're applying and you're interviewing for this job. And so, look for what that pain point is and how you can solve their problem. Um, so, all right. So that's the job posting. The other thing, well, before I stop sharing, anybody have any questions or anything on job postings or how to analyze that? Any tactical questions or anything?
Well, I noticed that there's a pay down there.
There is, and I can talk to that. So this is actually the first time I've ever put a pay on a job posting. A couple reasons I did it. One thing, wanted to communicate that it was a paid internship position because sometimes there's that question. Um, and then the other thing is I wanted to establish expectations. And so that people coming in and applying to the position kind of had an expectation of where the compensation would fall and what to expect. Um, Now, so my next point, Walter, actually talks about salary and how to have that discussion with a potential employer. So I can tell you, it's a touchy subject. I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm actually looking on the screen with the camera on it. Um, is every employer has a budget, and it's never a fixed dollar amount, regardless of what they tell you. If it's this is what we can pay, this is all we're going to pay, blah blah blah. It's never a fixed amount. It's always a range, and there's always negotiating points in terms of benefits. When you get into larger companies, the benefits negotiation and the pay are much more structured, and how you can qualify for those different levels and whatnot. When you're looking at a smaller company, um, it's going to be much more about the sales pitch and what you can offer and bring to the company in terms of the value that you're bringing to the organization. And so during interviews, I always ask, what are your salary expectations for this position? Um, and the reason I ask that question is I want to know, um, A, can I afford you? And B, how much do you value your time? How much do you value your worth as an employee? If you come in, and let's use this example as an internship position. If it wasn't already posted, and I said, hey, this is, what are you looking for in terms of um, a compensation? And they say, well, I'm I'm currently making $8.50 at McDonald's. So if I could make $8.50, that would be okay with me. Well, that tells me that you're not really certain about the market space. You don't know what it can bear. Um, and then my other concern is if you come in with an expectation of this is a McDonald's, and I'm not downplaying anyone's work ethic or anything like that regarding working at a fast food, but if you come into a professional organization with I'm going to show up to McDonald's and flip burgers attitude, that there's a discontinuity between employer expectations and what your expectations are of the position. And then on the other side, if you go in and say, well, I think I should be making, $26 an hour because, I'm awesome. Then that tells me, well, I can't afford you. I'm probably not going to be able to keep you happy here. And then if you really are worth that, then you're overqualified for the position. Um, so it's always good to give a range and say, one of the things that I came across when I was pulling together some material for this event, and I thought it was a very valid point, is to communicate to the employer that you expect to be treated fairly and be compensated fairly for the position. But you have to be very careful how you word it. You don't want to word it in the assumption a phrase of, um, I expect you to be treating me fairly, the accusational of presuming them guilty of trying to get you for as cheap as they can, more of, more of a sincere perspective of, I want to work for an employer that treats me fairly, and, understand that um, the position, whatever the position may afford, is an answer. So you want to try to not give a salary answer, even though I ask it out of my interviewees. I don't expect them to give me an answer, and I'll beat them up for it. I'll say, well, if you had to give me, what would you say is your range? And then that goes in. So always give a range. And going back to the research, you want to study the market space, with all the salaries.com, Glassdoor, all those. You have a multitude of resources. You can go pull up those job postings, look at now. Okay, look at the type of position and what the compensation is for the position. Look at the description of the job duties, because what somebody calls one thing at company X may be something completely different job title at company Y. So you got to look beyond what is just the job description and look at the job duties. But do a salary compensation survey of what's in the marketplace, and there's your range. Most of the time, employers are very aware and very cognizant of what that range is. Now, their ranges may be a subset of what that is, but it gives you a ballpark and it starts the conversation. So always give a range, never give a specific dollar value. Communicate that you're not looking to, make a killing on the position, but at the same time, you expect it to be fairly compensated by your employer. And then there was another point that I wanted to make. When you're starting, when you're a student, you're just starting out and you're getting your first position, understand that compensation should not really be your primary focus. It should be the skills and the information and the practical knowledge, practical application that you're getting on the job. So say you come in, employer says, I can only offer 45,000 for this position with potential to grow into a more senior, more advanced position. You're like, well, I really appreciate it, but if we can't just get there, 47,000 was really my low number, and I can't take anything below that. You need to be very mindful. Once you've gotten to a salary negotiation perspective, be very mindful for what you're walking away from, because the skills and experience, if you get put in a position where your responsibilities are going to be broad, diverse, and you're going to get to touch a whole bunch of different stuff, you're going to have significant responsibilities. There can be a lot of value beyond dollars for that position for a future employer. If they're not able, and if that company is not able to continue to meet your salary expectations, or is not eventually able to get you into a fair and comparable salary range. So, real quick, I don't want to drone on too long. Google interview questions. Everyone here knows the wonderful Google. Guarantee you, I do it. I'll Google interview questions to help fuel what I'm going to be asking a candidate. So I'm looking at the same material you are. Start there, figure out what you want to ask. And then the other thing is one of the things Walter was alluding to before turning it over to me is read your resume. You need to be able to talk to all the points on your resume I've had people, I'll ask a question on their resume and I get, a blank, either a pause on the phone or a dumb stare. And they're like, oh, that's on my resume. Oh, um, yeah, that's an old resume. And I'm like, okay, well, you gave me that's what you gave me, but okay, let's move on. And immediately that shows me that, they weren't paying attention. Um, it draws red flags in terms of, okay, how is this person going to be in attention to detail in their work? Are they going to be missing mistakes? Am I going to get reports, or am I going to get drawings, or whatever it may be, that's littered with errors because they're not reading what they're producing. So, make sure you read your resume, you know what's on it, and you're able to talk and sell, what you've done, what you've accomplished in the past, to your employer. Okay, so phone interview. Um, Couple things, and I've experienced on both ends, and I can tell you it makes a big difference. Like I said before, as soon as you learn about the job position, your interview begins. Phone interview. As soon as you pick up the phone, your interview is beginning when you answer the phone. And so, you know, I've had people, you know, tons of and this is a scheduled interview with a specific time, tons of background noise. They pick up the phone. Hey, what's up? Hello, who is this? And you're like, you know, hey, I'm wondering if I've got the right number because I'm expecting to speak with someone professional, someone who's prepared and ready for an interview. Um, Always answer the phone professionally, as if you were answering, for the president or for whoever, for somebody. You know, I can tell you my personal cell phone. Um, my family has my number. My customers have my number. My business partner, my employees, they all have this phone number. I use one number. Um, if I see a phone number and it's not a family member or a name that I know, and sometimes even if I do know who it is, I'll answer it. You know, hello, this is Aaron Blevins, or I'll answer the phone professionally, state my name so they know that they've got the right person, or if not, then they can be quickly say, oh yeah, sorry, I dialed the wrong number. um, Answer it professionally and promptly. Um,
Yeah,
you're preparing for this.
if you're looking for a job, you don't not answer your phone. That was a question that came up in a discussion I had with people that were trying to get jobs. Answer your phone. Don't eliminate. In other words, you're going to have to, even if the phone call is from out of state, if you're interviewing
Mm-hmm.
broadly, you need to answer your phone and don't. Um, if it's a sales call or some, you know, uh, like that, you can always let it go and hang up. But not answering your phone is not good.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, especially with today's, um, I wouldn't say displaced workforces, but people travel. They may be working in Florida and have a Tennessee phone number, or if they're right on the border and they live in one state, commute and work in another state, they're going to have a different area code, and so it may come up. Well, I applied to this position and the interview is going to be it's for a company in Florida. Why am I getting a phone call from Texas? It could be that the hiring manager is out of Texas, or, they're remotely working, whatever it may be. So, yeah, especially if you're looking for a job, and you're expecting phone calls, and you don't recognize the number, there's two ways to approach it, and both of them are acceptable. I would always encourage you to answer the phone if you can and you're able to, um, or make sure you have your voicemail set up properly and professionally. Hello, you've reached the phone of Aaron Blevins. I'm unable to take your call right now. Please leave your name, number, and a brief message, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. And that way they know that they've got the right person, and then you're giving them the specific details of what to do. You leave their name, number, and a quick message. All that's happening, and you're communicating effectively. Um, so yeah, that's a good point. Let's see here. Um, Keep your answers on topic. Um, So when an employer asks a question, they may not actually be asking the question that they're looking for the answer for. Um, and I'll give you an example from one of my interview questions. Um, let's see here. All right, here's a question that I ask on my interview. What type of work environment do you prefer? So that's the question I ask. The question that I really am asking in that is, we're a small employer, a small company, and we ask that our employees do a lot of different things. Uh, are you okay in that environment? Um, and so if you haven't done company research and you haven't done this other stuff, um, because if I ask that question, every single time I'm going to get the answer, well, yes, I love working in a small company and I love doing a whole bunch of different stuff and running around like a chicken with its head cut off. I enjoy doing that. Of course I do. Who wouldn't? Um, so by asking the question in this way, it lets me gauge, um, where are they comfortable? If they like working in a big company and doing a very detail specific job, um, that's okay, and that's a valid answer. But in my situation, because we are a small company and we have a small team of engineers, um, I require a diverse skill set. And so if you're comfortable and you like doing the same thing over and over again and focusing and getting extremely, you're one of three people in the entire world that knows how to design a subprocessor in a Harvard architecture microprocessor chip, it's probably not going to be a good job fit. And so by me asking that, I'm asking it in a way that doesn't pressure them to answer it the way they think that I want them to answer it. And so whenever a question is presented to you, understand, put yourself in the employers. And again, going back to the original, my original thought approach was, you're here, the reason you're at the interview is you're solving a problem for the employer. They have a need. They need someone with your skills. So how are you going to solve that problem for them? And be honest. If you don't like working, or if you're getting through the interview and it doesn't seem like it's a good fit, it is okay to conclude the interview with, I really appreciate your time. I thank you for, spending the time with me. But as we discussed, the roles and responsibilities of the job position, I don't think that I am a good fit for your company. And that's not saying that it's not saying that you're unqualified, and it's not saying that you don't like the company. It's just saying that I don't think there's going to be a fit here. Um, and leave it open. Be in the meeting, leaving yourself open for future potential job interviews, because 10 years down the road, they may have changed and they may need to hire a subsystem component architecture designer for a microprocessor. And they're going to say, okay, let's give Joe a call back because he was a perfect guy. We can sit him down in a corner of the office space and nobody's going to bother him, and he can focus on doing one thing for the next 5 years. Leave yourself options. Also, the interviewing manager, the engineering manager that you were talking to, and left with a positive view, he may be talking to one of his buddies over at Lockheed or over at Microchip or whoever it may be, and then be like, hey, well, I was interviewing this one guy, and he sounds like it would be perfect for who you're trying to hire for that position. Let me see if I can dig up his resume, and I'll shoot you over his contact information, and see if he may be a good fit for you. And if he is, I can potentially reach out to him and get a connection with him. So, leave yourself options, but be upfront and make sure you're not wasting the engineering manager's time or the interviewee's time, understanding that, most of the time, the people who are making the hiring decisions, their job is not to hire people. Their job is to get a job done, and they're hiring you to help them do that job. And so when they're talking with you, when they're doing an interview, they're not getting their day job done. And so just be mindful and respectful of that so that you're not wasting their time. And I guarantee you that they will remember that, and that will be appreciated. Um, okay, so if you come across the thing, if you don't have an answer to a question that you get asked on the phone, what do you do? Um, if it is a technical question and it's something that you should know, you're out of luck, hang up the phone and say, sorry for wasting your time. I will call you back when I go back to school. No. Always answer it in a way that gives the employer, because there is no employer out there that's going to expect you to have the answer to every single question all the time. But what they are going to be interested in, if you do not have the answer, what are you going to do to determine the answer? And so if you don't have an answer, what you would want to do for a technical approach is you're going to want to describe the process of how you would go about solving that problem. Um, I don't know how to do that right now, but I can tell you that I would do this, this, and this, and this. Um, what you don't want to say is, well, I would just, seek out my colleagues at the job and ask them questions. Um, and, you know, and I guess it depends on the type of position, but if it's a smaller company where everybody's super busy, and you're telling them that you're going to reach out and talk to their colleagues and ask their colleagues questions on how to do a whole bunch of stuff, I can tell you the hiring manager's going to be thinking, great, this guy's going to come in, he's going to not know anything, he's going to be asking and distracting the other engineers and keeping them from getting stuff done. Um, Now, if it's a junior position where you're not necessarily expected to know everything, then the employer is going to assume, and they're already going to take the role as an educator or teacher and train you for that position. And so you have to make the assumption that you're going to have the basic skill set to do the job. And so in that regards, you could answer the question as well, being that I will be in this position, I'm planning on further studying through self-study after hours at work on the weekends and stuff. I really wanted to learn this, this, and this. And so, over the next couple of months, that's my intent, is to start with this training so that I'm better prepared to do my job at the position. Um, so you're communicating to your employer how you're going to solve the problem. Again, keeping in mind that you don't want to become a burden. You don't want to push the obligation and challenge onto others. All right. Um, let's see. Oh, the other thing Walter was alluding to, uh, phone connections. Cell phones are a wonderful technology um, when they work. When they don't work, they're awful and completely useless. Um, I've had phone interviews where I heard every other word from a candidate. And I can guarantee you it's hard to have a conversation with someone who you can only hear every other word. If you find that there is really bad communication with the interviewer, um, don't be nervous or afraid to ask, hey, we have a really bad connection. Can either I call you back or can you give me a call back and let's try to reconnect this? Um, Versus if there is a bad communication, your chances of getting the position went from 50-50 down to almost zero, because they're not going to be able to gauge you. They're not going to be able to hear your responses. It's going to sound like you are unreliable, and you're not able to manage your equipment that you're working on. And so if you get put in front of a computer, the computer stops working, are you just going to keep working, or are you going to try to stop and solve the problem? Is there going to be productivity issues? So don't be afraid to say, hey, this is a really bad connection, can I call you back either on a landline, or can we try to reestablish this communication? Let's see here. Always have questions. Make sure they are meaningful questions and related to the job. So I'll give you an example. Um, you can ask, let's see. So, two different ways to phrase the question. Um, one would be, the way not to ask the question would be, you know, you come to the interview, you get to the end of the interview, the hiring manager is asking a question. They say, do you have any questions for me? Um, and you say, hey, yeah, you know, you seem like a really smart individual. So you're complimenting them, right? That's got to be a good thing. Um, what chose you to lead? Why did you choose your career? Why are you? Why do you do what you do? What drew you to the industry? While you're asking about more information about from the interviewee, you're asking them, sort of with flattery of, why are you doing what you're doing? Where's your passion? Stuff like that. While they may be willing to answer the question, it's not really gauging and giving them any information about you, which is the whole purpose of the interview. Um, a different way to go about that, and kind of what I would imagine that a person, an interviewee, is trying to determine from that situation is, you could say, hey, I'm really interested in this industry, and I could see myself. I want to learn more about the practical applications of rotary wing training, um, and I'm looking to start training and learning more. Once I begin my professional career. Um, is there any type of associations or anything that you recommend or anything that you've done in your career that would help me be better prepared for my duties and my job? Um, and so you're taking and you're showing initiative. You're looking for ways to better improve yourself to solve the problem for the employer versus, um, pushing it back on them and asking, more of a, okay, well, that's great. Why'd they ask me this question? I have no clue what value that brings to the employee-employer relationship. So, a couple things for a Zoom interview. Chris, how are we doing on time?
It's about 8:10 almost.
Okay, we good for a little bit?
Yeah,
Or am
we're good.
I? Okay. I'm going a lot longer, and as I told Walter and Chris, I tend to ramble once I get going. So if you have questions, feel free to chime in during the middle of this. Chris, if you're
Yeah.
seeing any questions come across,
I have a
feel free.
question for you. When you, which I don't, you may know more than I do, Aaron. Do you, when you interview somebody, how productive are they? In other words, in some companies, a person comes in and the company is actually having to invest 6 months in you before you
Mhm.
become productive.
Yep.
I would imagine a smaller company that time horizon. So in other words, what I think what guys that are tendering their resume expecting to get a land a position, they don't realize often that the company is having to invest half a year perhaps in you before you actually become productive. Is that your experience with?
Um, so it depends. Depends on the role and the level of responsibilities. Um, and so when I'm hiring a junior engineer, um, I typically try to get them to be as productive as soon as possible because I'm investing a dollar for every hour that they're working, and the sooner that I can get a return on that dollar, the better off the company's going to be. Um, and so, typically, what I will do as an employer, I'll stage their uh, work roles, work positions, and how I'm assigning them job duties. I'll start with low level stuff, things that I would expect there to be very little, maybe procedural type training, but as far as technical or experience and stuff like that, there would be very minimal amount required of investment on my time that puts them in immediate productivity mode. And then as I'm comfortable with who they are, their work experience, how they're contributing to the company, how they're continuing as an employee, I would then bring in more higher level, more complex tasks, and increasing level of responsibilities. Um, yeah, understand whenever an employer brings you in, Walter, you were saying 6 months. It can sometimes cost me an entire year's worth of salary to hire somebody in terms of investments of training, bring them in. So, when you come in making, say you come in at a starting salary, $56,000 a year, understand that the employer is paying $56,000 just to get you in that seat and to get you productive and producing for the company. And so if you look at that on an actuarial basis, it could take 2 years before you actually start becoming profitable to the company that you're working for. And so understand that when you're working in a position, um, first couple of years, you're I wouldn't say you owe the company money because they're taking the risk and burden of investing in you as a new employee. But just be mindful of that. When you're a new hire, uh, don't come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 o'clock in the evening on the dot. Don't sit there and look at your watch. Oh well, it's 4:48. I'm going to go ahead and start shutting down the applications, and I'm making sure my right foot's out the front door by 5 o'clock. Um, not Honestly, that's insulting as a business owner. Um, Understanding that there's quite a bit of difference between a business owner and employee, but understand that they're taking money out of their pocket to pay you to do your duty, with the understanding and the hopes that you're going to continue and work there for an extended amount of time. But yeah, it can take up to 2 years before you recover any kind of profitability on employees. But so my approach, to answer your question, Walter, is I try to get them productive on small tasks. Um, I'm still losing money at that point because I'm paying them to do a professional engineering job, but they're at least starting to become productive and starting to work through the backlog, whatever task that we're trying to get done, whatever position they were hired for. So yeah.
Okay.
All right. Zoom interview. So let's talk about that a little bit. Just kind of, it seems to be obviously the way to go right now. When you are going to have an interview, um, make sure there's nothing else open on your computer screen except for the Zoom app. No other distractions. Make sure that the computer screen that you're working on with the Zoom app is the computer screen with the camera. If you have the ability, practice with either a friend or someone else, and practice just sit there staring at the camera, trying not to be distracted with what's on the Zoom call. Because you still want to have that intimacy of looking at the interviewer, face to face, eye to eye. That's obviously a North American custom that we have direct eye contact during interviews. So have everything else closed. Make sure you're focused on it. Practice looking at the camera. And the other thing, Walter kind of alluded to it, backgrounds. Make sure that you have a professional background. There's pros and cons. You want to have a level of authenticity. I personally would not recommend you using, the simulated backgrounds that put you floating in space or whatever, because with color contrast, if you're wearing a green shirt or something, or the cameras don't pick it up right, and you're a head floating in space at that point in time. Plus the other thing it brings up, okay, they're trying to hide something. They're putting up a wall between me and their private life. Is there something there that I should be concerned about as an employer? So I would recommend against that. If you have some really cool posters in your bedroom, if they're either obscene or questionable, I would advise those to either be taken down or finding a place in your home or a location to where it's a blank wall. Or if you have some really cool engineering posters, it could be potentially a great conversation piece for the interview and allow the employer. Now, I wouldn't bring them up, be like, hey, cool, look at my awesome posters, or, look at this great mug that I got in Tahiti, or whatever it may be. But, at least gives them something potentially to ask about. Say, hey, I noticed, that you have a sailing model in the background. Do you sail? and then it gives them a whole conversation piece, potentially learn more about you as an individual, and it also makes you seem authentic. So no virtual, either a background that looks interesting or inviting to the specific job role that you would be doing, or just a blank wall or nothing behind you. Um, Make sure you know how to use the software. I think that kind of goes without saying, but make sure you know how to use the software. Same thing with technology. If you don't know how to use it, it can become an immense hindrance to you actually getting the position. The other thing is posture. Um, for video conferencing, this is something that is new. If you're doing an interview, you don't want to be leaned back and kind of like all, lounging around everywhere. Um, you want to be sitting upright, leaning forward, engaged with the camera, make sure you're paying attention. Um, your posture and your attitude is going to reflect of what they're going to see, what their expectations are when you come and actually start participating in the day-to-day activities of your job. That's all I have to bring up on the Zoom interview. Face-to-face. Chris, do we have any questions or anything from YouTube or?
I don't see anything on YouTube.
All
Yeah,
right.
if you guys are watching on YouTube, you can use the YouTube live chat and we'll read out your questions here. So you can go ahead and type those in if you have any.
All right. Moving on to face-to-face interviews. So now you've gone through a phone interview or a Zoom interview. You've made it through that. I can tell you in my past the internship, mechanical engineering internship that I just showed you guys with the job description, I had over 200 applications online. Of those 200, I had ended up conducting about 20 phone interviews. I wanted a broad spread across the candidacy to see if and try to gauge. Also, not only was I gauging what the candidates were capable of doing, but I was also still filling out kind of what I wanted in that role. And so talking to 20 different individuals kind of gave that perspective of capability and the candidate pool. Of those, I selected 3 for a face-to-face interview. So you can kind of see the paring down from 200 applications to 20 phone interviews down to 3 face-to-face interviews. So be very mindful of time. Again, like I said before, they have a day job they're trying to get done. You want to arrive early. You want to be there at least 15 minutes early on site. If it is a bigger company, like a Lockheed or something like that, they're probably, most of the time, they're going to set up and they're going to have days scheduled for an interview, and they're going to have a day that the hiring manager is going through and they're interviewing however many candidates they need. They may be interviewing for multiple positions at that time, but typically they'll have it scheduled. So you want to show up early, make sure that you're through the sign-in procedure and that you're in place and ready and available. Typically you'll be in the waiting room. If it's a smaller company and you get there 15 minutes early, don't go in yet. I wouldn't advise you going in at the soonest 10 minutes early, but at the latest 5 minutes early. Understand they're going to have meetings, they're going to have other tasks that they're trying to wrap up and get done before they come out and they meet with you. And if you show up 15 minutes early, they may not be ready for you. So you want to be there early, but again, don't present yourself until 5 minutes to 10 minutes before your actual scheduled interview. Okay. The other interesting thing that I've had experience with is dress professionally. Obviously with quarantine and doing all this fun stuff, people have had luxuries of, growing out long beards and stuff like that. But dress professionally. So cover up tattoos. Guys, if you have an interview, remove earrings. Girls, no short, tight skirts or low-cut tops. Think about the professionalism of the job. You don't want to go in there looking like you're a lawsuit to happen. And so just make sure you're presenting yourself as a professional worker, and that everyone's focused on, your skills and your abilities, and not, the tattoo of, a cross, a lowrider, and whatever else up and down your forearm. Cover those up. Now, if a conversation opens up in interview, and the guy's talking about how, you get off subject and you're talking about motorcycles and tattoos, sure, at that point, roll up your sleeve, show them that you've got tats, and be like, compare stories. But let the employer lead that conversation and gauge the comfortness as the face-to-face interview occurs. Give yourself options. Skills and performance. So on your resume, you had listed, hopefully, if you were listening to what Walter was saying, you've got skills and performances, things that you are able to do and things that you have done in the past. When you show up to the interview, make sure you are knowledgeable in those areas. And so if you put on your resume, I understand ANSI compliance documentation for manufacturing, be prepared to be asked questions about it. Again, if you don't know the answer, don't fake it and pretend like you know the answer. You can say, well, I've never done that specific thing, but I have done this, and give a detailed example of that. Or if it's going on the ANSI standard, I've never done a cross-sectional exploded view on an assembly, but I have an ANSI manual. I would refer to the section where it talks about detailed exploded views and refer that. And there, I know that there's a couple of different methods of that. And so the other thing I would be looking at would be company materials, looking through some of the company drawings to see some examples of what is, which format and method this company, you guys have adopted, and make sure I use those examples. And so just be prepared and be able to talk to the skills. One of the things I said earlier is personality and cultural fit. Is the other big thing that the employer is trying to gauge. And so that's going to be very critical in face-to-face interviews. So when you're there, you're talking about the company. If you're given a company tour, or if you're walking around engaging with other employers, the interviewee, he's going to be watching your reactions. They're going to be watching, your facial expressions. Are you engaging? Are you withdrawing? Are you, what is your temperament, and how you're interacting with other employees, with other interviewers, if you have multiple interviewers that you're working with during the interview process. The other thing is know as much as possible, like I said before, about who is potentially going to be interviewing them. If you get the individual's name, go look them up, go understand who they are, what perspective. Are they another engineer? Are they a hiring manager? Are they a project manager who has, a different set of needs? Are they going to want to understand and know that they can rely on you as an engineer advice? Or is it going to be, the engineering manager who wants you to make him look good? So go for it.
Yeah, I would offer, I've got something I would like to show about social media, but so in other words, people can look you up on social media, and you don't want to have a bad profile. I would like to show you something real quick here on that.
Sure.
Here's a profile of a social media that a person. This is an example, so you can tell right away she's, this is a pretty positive. She's got her contact info, and she talks about what she does. You talked about not having revealing photos. This is a professional looking person. Of course, so, and then it shows her activity and her experience. This is almost like a live resume right there. Look at that.
This would be
on her social media account. There's her education.
Yep.
This is a great social. This is using social media to your advantage in a job situation.
Right, and understand that if you've got a great LinkedIn site, understand that your name may also come up for Facebook. And so if you've got a public Facebook page, you probably should either turn it private so that they can't see anything, or go through it and make sure that there's nothing questionable. As much as employers want to see their employees have lives outside of work, they want to do all that, but understand that what you do outside of work also reflects on your employer, potentially giving the current news outlets, they will use anything and everything they can to create a story that will sell. And so just be very mindful that if you do have a social media Facebook page, that it's private to friends or people that you only approve of, and not out to open space. That would be my general recommendation, just to eliminate any possible liabilities for either something that somebody could post that would show up on your page, or I don't do social media at all. I think LinkedIn is the only form of social media I have, so I can't speak a lot to that effect. But I just know, try to keep your personal life as private as possible, and that way you're controlling what you're choosing to share with your employer.
Well, do you typically search a candidates? Say you're down selected to three potential people. Do you go out and look at social media to see if there's a profile that shows up on that person? Or
I don't do that um, before the, let's see, I wouldn't do it before the face to face, but I can tell you that I've done it before I extend an offer to an individual. I'll go out, I'll look, I'll just Google their name, see what pops up. I'll check LinkedIn, Facebook. I'll Google their name and see what shows up. Just because I kind of want to make sure that the person I'm investing in isn't a complete psycho. Not in the clinical version, but in
yeah,
I need to know that they're going to be a reliable employee.
okay,
So, but yeah, I'll do that. And usually any of the bad stuff will come up during a background check. So,
oh yeah, right.
which leads to um, an interesting thought. Um, if you do have questionable stuff in your background, um, do not try to cover it up. Um, in some situations, it will disqualify you from positions. A lot of times, if you are a felon, your ability to get a security clearance will be compromised. And so at that point, you will not be able or valid to work on very specific projects, and it could completely eliminate you. Be very upfront about that so if be prepared to talk about it and have an explanation as to what happened, and talk about how this was a one-time thing, this was the situation, these are the things I've done since then to get better. You know, employers understand that you're a person, people change, and bad things happen to good people. But if you're not upfront and you're not honest with them, that shows that you are still untrustworthy, and whatever happened in your past, could potentially cause problems for that employer. So just make sure you're able to communicate and talk about it, and address the situation. And be very respectful. Understand that sometimes a background incident, event, or something could potentially prevent you or prevent the employer from even being able to hire you as an employee. So keep that in mind. Don't cover it up. I would not say to be forthcoming and sharing it openly, but I would say the valid point to disclose that would be on a job application. You would list it. Typically, there's a section on most job applications about criminal history or current litigation or anything like that. You'll have a section that you would have to write that down in. Make sure you're very objective in how you write it down. But again, don't lie on your application. Don't try to cover it up, because Most of the time, it will come to light. Uh, Hopefully, it would come to light before you get the position, and not afterwards. So everyone's coming to terms and hiring on the same, common basis. Um, and then obviously, worst case is you cover it up, you lie about it, and then the employer finds out 6 months, a year down the road, and they can't trust you as an individual. You're terminated for falsely representing yourself to the company, um, and potentially facing litigation from the employer for misrepresenting yourself. So you just cover your bases, make sure you're being honest with your future employer.
Yeah, and many positions require a clearance. Um, if you're a student that's trying to get your foot in the door, you're just sometimes you'll have to wait. It could be months before you get your secret clearance to be able to do meaningful work for the company. That I've heard that happen to people. Uh, I don't. Does that? Have you ever experienced that, Aaron, in your workplace?
Yeah, typically what'll happen is you'll come in to the position. If they're able to hire you, they'll bring you on. They'll put you on projects that don't require secret clearance, and you'll do other odds and ends, and that way you're still an employee. Um, Chris may actually be able to speak to this a little bit better than me, but I know before the company can actually start your application, you actually either have to have an offer from the company with a specific start date, or you have to have already started with your employer before you can start the security clearance application process.
Yeah, I started a job last year that required it, and you do have to have a start date scheduled, I believe. But I did start the process before I actually started the job,
Okay.
which was actually kind of difficult because I had to get information from busy managers and busy security people without an internal
Yep.
email address. So it was a challenge. But
Yep.
yeah, you can start it once you have the start date. Usually they'll wait until they do their preliminary company background check first, give you the
Right.
start date and everything. Once everything's settled and you're just waiting out your old company, then you can start the paperwork.
Yeah,
Which right now is taking a little longer than normal because they're doing it all online. So definitely
Right.
something to think about that you might
yeah, I
end
don't
up hopefully working on something at least for the first few months.
ideally, yeah, because typically, and it's worked in a couple different ways depending on the role and the position that you're going into. Um, you've got your background application, you've got the 50-page biography that you got to write about yourself, and then you get into the FBI interview portions, which I don't know how they're doing that now. um,
Zoom.
where they go back to your second grade teacher and interview your second grade teacher to say, hey, was he a good student? Did he act up or cut up or I
Yeah.
exaggerate. I don't think they actually go back to your second grade teacher, but it is depending on which clearance you're going through. Um, I'd actually started the process for a top secret clearance, and it was quite involved. I ended up leaving the company before we completed the process, um, and so I was able to stop it before there was too much money heavily invested in
Yeah. It
in
costs a
the
lot of
process.
money.
But they
Um,
do. Yep. I haven't looked at the recent numbers, but I remember um, I think secret and above you can get up into the $30,000-$40,000
mhm.
range pretty quickly in terms of cost by the time you take into account. And then that's company side, and then on top of that you've got the government side that typically it's about 50-50. Um, and then depending on the contract the company's working on, there might be a chargeback provision that allows the company to recuperate that cost. But yeah.
Yeah, so they're very. I wanted to share something because I have a question for the group. So here's this resume of a student. Now get this. This is a student. Okay, so he's got all this experience, his education, and his interests. And this guy got a job with Lockheed Martin. I mean, he was. But here he's got. So he puts in what he's done. But my question is, so this is like the top half of the resume, right? What about putting a job objective at the top of the resume? How do Chris and Aaron feel about that versus just having an intro like this?
Chris, you can go first.
I don't have much experience with that. I actually
Okay.
don't have anything like that on my resume. So,
For I could say for students, objectives are nice, but at that point in time, I'm going to assume that a student doesn't have much workforce experience in terms of um, the engineering profession. And so I'm going to go in with the assumption that they don't really know exactly what they're wanting to do with their life, but they kind of have an idea. And so I think really what's going to be more important uh, is going to be skills. You could have interest on the resume, but I wouldn't put it in the top. I would put skills and experiences as close to the top as possible.
So there's
Um,
really no need for a job objective type thing. It doesn't
I
add a
I
whole lot.
wouldn't. It's just
Yeah.
a waste of space on a student resume. Um, I'm assuming that you're applying to the position because you're interested in it, um, and that basically your job objective is to get this job that I posted.
And that's understood.
That's what I'm assuming. Otherwise, why are you applying to that job? Um, and so, once you become a professional and you're looking more for more intrinsic value, intrinsic return from a position, that's when it becomes much more meaningful because then I know, as a employer who's hiring a senior engineer, um, what drives you, what motivates you, what are you looking for out of your professionalism, growth, development, or contributions to the industry. That's when it becomes a lot more important. And I would say probably you start to develop that after 2 or 3 years of being in the industry and actually working. Um, some people may take longer. Other people may fall in love with it when they're in high school, but that's because they've got practical hands-on experience that they're working through.
Right.
So I would focus on skills and experiences before I
Right.
would for an objective there.
All right.
Now, if I do have a comment, if you get asked, uh, you know, when you graduate, where do you want to, what do you want to do with your life? If it is a company that builds rockets, don't tell them you want to go build race cars, um, because there's I understand both of them go fast, but if you want to go build race cars, you need to go apply to a race car building company. If you
Right.
already know that's what you want to do when you grow
Right.
up, because again, 2 years of investment before you start making the company profit. Um, they want to make sure that you're going to be willing to stick around, even if it's an internship position. Most companies are still fielding future candidates um, and potentially developing into a professional role, even at Lockheed, Boeing. Certainly here, when I bring on an internship, it would be beneficial to me to have you continue on in a professional role as long as I have a need and a job requirement that I can place you in. So that's,
Uh, there's another question that comes up is going through a staffing agency, a professional staffing agency. I think this is more for young professionals or mid-career people as opposed to students who typically would not be using a staffing agency. But there's some pros and cons there.
mhm.
Um, I've had good experience with staffers and bad experiences. So, any feedback there? Actually, most of
um,
my experience has been good with staff because I basically don't have to pay their fee. It's the company that pays the fee.
well, from the company's perspective, I can tell you that staffing companies are not cheap. Um, and so the good thing is they do a lot of vetting on the front end. And so I know the representations and what's being brought to me as an employer. They've already spent the time, they've gone through, and they know that the candidate can do the things that they're saying that they can do um, most of the time. There's I've yeah, I've hired people from placement agencies that didn't work out, and it wasn't a lack of my ability to communicate the job roles and responsibilities. It was a misrepresentation of the individual. Um, but that's the assumption. Staffing agencies can charge anywhere from uh, you know 20% of annual salary as a placement fee, all the way up to 1 year's salary as a placement fee. And so when you're bringing on someone from a staffing company, um, there's a big investment there on the employer side to bring them in. Um,
Mm.
so I've had mixed experience with them. I typically prefer to go direct. Um, so yeah,
Okay,
that's my take on it.
good enough.
We have a question
Uh,
off of YouTube. Daniel asked, would it be worthwhile to mention U.S. citizenship in a resume?
um, Absolutely, especially if it's for a role or position that is for a Department of Defense contractor. That's almost always a requirement is for you to be a U.S. citizen. If you need to have security clearances, I can't speak from experience, but I don't know of any time where foreigners with work visas or anything have received security clearances. Um, I don't know. I could be speaking out of turn there, but I'm not aware of that. Um, so yeah, I would put U.S. citizenship on your job title if you know you're going to be working for a company that either subcontracts directly with the U.S. government or is a prime contractor with the U.S. government, because oftentimes um, uh, programs that are with the government they require the employees to have U.S. citizenship.
Yeah, and from my experience, that should be generally in the listing for the position. So a lot of times they'll say you need to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. You need
Mhm.
to be capable of having a background check for whatever level of clearance or just working on ITAR or export controlled information, things like that. So oftentimes it'll be there, or they'll ask you in the initial phone screen as well. So
Correct.
it's
Yep.
definitely a good point when you're looking through that requisition to pull that out and say, okay, they need a U.S. citizen, so I'll make sure it's in my application. Um,
Right. And even if it doesn't say it, I would say it's if you are a U.S. citizen, it is always valuable information to offer up, um, because it's not going to count against you. And you can put it somewhere in the bottom of your resume under skills and qualifications or something like that. Permanent U.S. citizen, permanent resident or U.S. citizen, qualified to work for any employer. Something along those lines is fine. Um, so yeah, I would err on the side of including it versus not including it, because then it answers that question and there's no uncertainty from the employer's perspective.
okay.
Um,
We have a follow-up to that question. Does an issue occur when a person has gained their U.S. citizenship?
um, you're saying, is there an issue if the person was not a citizen before but now is?
I believe that's the question, yeah. That's what it sounds like.
Um, I would just I would just leave it as a U.S. citizen at that point. I wouldn't leave it any other way. Um, and honestly, I don't know how valuable or if it would be a point of um, contempt if you know if say you're in the process of working on your citizenship and you said citizenship expected by. I think that may be more damning than good. And so if you're in that situation, I probably wouldn't put anything on the resume. And then if it gets brought up during the interview process, say, um, if they say, oh, but of course you're a U.S. citizen, right? And they're filling out, the job application or whatever it may be. At that point in time, you could share that information. Again, going back to being open and honest with the employer, saying, well, I don't have my citizenship yet, but I'm expecting to have the adjudication and the process complete by this date, whatever it may be.
And I would definitely expect the background check to take longer if that's the case, um, especially if you're
Yeah,
going for a clearance. I know a lot of them will say, are you eligible for a clearance? So definitely do some research online. I'm
understanding
not
that
sure.
what it takes. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you look, okay, this job says it needs a secret clearance. If you were born in a certain country, you should maybe Google that. I don't know if that information is going to be out there, but at least
Um,
having an understanding that, as far as I'm aware, yes, I am eligible for this, because you really don't want to get 6 months into a job and then find out that you don't qualify for it because of something. And most of the time, my understanding with some people I know that have had clearances that took a while is that they're not just going to turn it back and say no. They're going to ask you questions. They're going to tell you why. They're going to work with you to figure it out. It just might take a little longer. They might have to interview some people back in that country, or your parents, or people that were involved with you getting your citizenship, to kind of make sure that everything's on the up and up there. And I assume there's probably a list of countries you can't come from and get a citizenship and then get a clearance, but that's probably published somewhere, or they would probably tell you immediately when you applied if that was the case,
Yep.
when you
If
apply for the
you're
clearance itself.
if you're an honest and well-doing person, most of the time it's not going to be an issue. Um, it just may require a little bit more legwork on your behalf to push through the process. So
Exactly. Yeah, I just went through the process over the summer to get mine updated, and everything's done by Zoom or I think Microsoft Teams now. So um, it's definitely an interesting time, but they're very nice people. They want to work with you. They don't want to kick you out. As long as you're being honest and you're willing to work with them, they'll do everything they can to make sure that everything goes well.
yeah,
They
and
show you a fancy badge and you get all scared, and it's like, no, they're nice guys. They want to help you.
yeah, when the FBI show up to have an interview, it
Yeah, it
can
can be
become a little nerve
intimidating.
wracking. You're like, what did I do?
When they Zoom call you, it's not quite as bad, thankfully.
Right, that's true. They travel in packs when they show up.
Yeah.
But yeah, for recertification, it's not as bad. But when they open initial investigation on you, um, they like to dig deep. So they're purposefully trying to intimidate you because they want to make sure that you're sharing as much information as possible. So that's
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
part of the process, just understanding the process.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody else have any questions on YouTube? I know there's a few people kind of watching a minute or two behind, so we'll give them a couple minutes. But
Mhm.
Okay.
anybody on Zoom have any questions for us? I know we have a few students on
A
Zoom.
couple of questions. The first one being, so this past summer, I was offered an internship at Jacobs, working at the TOSC at NASA. Unfortunately, it was canceled due to COVID. So I'm kind of like in this weird predicament where I don't know what to do about that on my resume because I want to mention it because it's like a very positive thing just to be accepted into such a thing. But it's obviously I didn't get that work experience, so I don't know how to bring it up properly.
Well, were you actually put in that position, or?
I was hired to I was fully hired on board, and then they canceled it last second.
Had you started? Had you started actually working in the job, or were you just placed, getting ready to start?
Getting ready to start.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's certainly an accomplishment. Um, I don't know that I would list that prominently on your resume, um, just because successfully going through the interview process. And Chris, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on what's involved in that. I know you went through the process. You actually worked for Jacobs as a professional, but um, again, employers are going to be looking for what have you done, and although it is a good and a noteworthy accomplishment to get through the process of getting the internship, um, there wasn't any value that you actually ended up bringing to the employer in that position. If it gets brought up, I would certainly share it and say, yeah, unfortunately, due to the circumstances, they weren't able to bring me into the office so that I could, do the internship. Um, so yeah, that's my, as a hiring manager, that's my input.
Okay, so by like not listing it prominently, like I shouldn't list it at all, or maybe like put it at the end or not put it.
Um, do you have any other employer-employee type relationships where you have applicable experience?
Yes. In replacement of that, I started working at the simulations laboratory here at UCF for the summer.
I'd
No,
be
I could put that instead.
I'd be inclined to leave it off because you never did really work there
Right.
Okay.
at Jacobs.
Okay.
Yeah, I would certainly put the research lab um, over that position. And I would, like I said, I would probably just leave it off. And if it comes up during the natural conversation of the interview, you can talk about it. and certainly talk about your experience in going through the interview process and how learning about the company changed your perception or didn't change or reaffirmed your perception of the company. Those would certainly be valid talking points, but beyond that, there's not really too much that it would contribute.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Are you graduating before next summer?
I'm graduating next December, so we got some time.
So I would definitely speak to anybody you knew there again and see if they're up for doing something this summer, because I imagine they're a pretty small company when it comes to HR, so they'll probably have your name written down somewhere and might be able to get you in there this summer.
If they've gone through the trouble to get you that far, assuming that the need and everything is still there, I would be willing to place money that you have a pretty good opportunity of getting back in there, assuming nothing substantial has changed with your situation or theirs.
Yeah.
So, because they've already invested all that time and energy into getting you into that position or that at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good advice. Anything else before we?
Yeah, and I saw Daniel on YouTube had the same issue with Lockheed. They rescinded it because of COVID. So seems like that happened a lot. I know people are gonna know it's a weird summer, so
Yep.
hopefully they'll be able to kind of forgive a gap on
Certainly
your
the
resume,
exception.
and yeah, they'll understand that. We do have another question on YouTube from Nick. As a freshman at UCF, how can I make myself competitive when applying for an internship, even though I do not have any experience and could get looked over due to that?
Ooh.
So if you are a freshman applying for a internship position now, um, it is fair game to go back to high school. I would imagine if you chose engineering discipline, you worked on engineering projects. That's where I would focus on things that you've done, that you've achieved, that are unique. Interest, hobbies. If you don't have one that's related to the engineering discipline, you need to get one, and you probably need to get about four. So 3D printers are okay. So from my perspective, we're a manufacturer. Um, Things that stuck out to me: 3D printers, people who had practical experience with designing products in SolidWorks or something like that, and actually starting to print and tinker and play with projects. That was very attractive. From my perspective, because it showed initiative, so showed people who were interested in the manufacturing process. They wanted to go, design something, see if it could be built, even if it's playing. And 3D printers now, you can pick up, a cheap Chinese printer, COVID free for less than $100 on Amazon. So there's, I understand it's still $100, but if you look at the opportunity that could present with you once you've got the hands-on experience of doing some of those things, plus interactions with clubs at the university, when you're doing those types of projects, all that stuff is going to have. If they're looking at an internship type role at that level, they're not going to expect you to have professional experience. They're going to be looking at what you're doing in school, what the extracurricular activities that you're doing, how engaged are you in the engineering discipline that you're seeking an internship position for. That's what they're going to be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Daniel on YouTube says projects. I definitely agree with that. I never actually had any internships in college. I worked in two research labs, which was kind of my experience before getting a real professional job. And what stood out to them was the projects that I had experience hands-on with things, with designing things, building things, testing things, and that they knew I could do the job they needed. So going into a research lab, they said, we need somebody that knows how to solder, that knows how to do, basic machining, that knows how to 3D print things and design things. And it's like, oh, well, I built this airplane and I built this quadcopter and I did all those things as a part of those projects. And literally in the interview, the guy handed me a key and said, okay, you work for me now. I'm going to pay you this much and you're going to work on this project. And then it kind of builds up from there. You get that first job and then you have that experience and then it keeps building up.
It snowballs, then you get better and better experience. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that first step is just to stand out and do something that makes you look like, okay, this guy, they want to do work. They're hardworking. They do something that makes them stand out from the crowd. Even if they're not working professionally right now, they're still learning and they're still applying their skill.
Absolutely. Yep. That's where those hobbies come into play.
Yeah.
So
Great. Um,
And one last question
Sorry.
before we go. Walter, I remember you mentioned, you know, sometimes you can have one page, sometimes two pages. It depends on your experience, of course.
Yeah.
I'm a senior in college right now at UCF, and I have two versions of my resume. One I do have two pages, and one I have one page. The on the one page, I felt like I kind of cut myself short because I do have the experience, but I almost am not confident in doing the two page because a lot of people say like don't if you're in college like you don't have a reason to do two pages. So
Well,
like is
no,
that worth doing as even if you're in
remember
college?
there's no rules in resumes, just right. If you have enough experience to require two pages, do two pages. But you want to use your real estate. Real estate is very precious in resumes, so you want to put your skills and everything important, on top. And then if if you've got enough experience, like I was showing you. Let me just share this again. Um, so this student has one page and used his real estate very wisely. He's got a lot of experience and leadership, and he put it all on one page. So in your case, if it really requires two pages, go for, but put the important things up front. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say if you're getting close, that's definitely a challenge I had last year. Kind of definitely tailor your resume for the job you're looking at. So if you have experience that isn't as relevant, you don't necessarily need to put every single line of that job if it's not super relevant to the job you're applying for. Um, Before we go, we do have one more question here. Do employers tend to care about being bilingual in the engineering sector? It seems something that is left out in resumes. I don't know how often being bilingual can come to use in engineering.
Yeah, I'll put it on my resume at the bottom.
Yeah, I think under the skills, in a lot of ways, it just shows that you're a very well-rounded person, more so than
Yeah,
me at
doesn't
least.
hurt to put
So
it on. Um,
yeah, definitely can't hurt.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to listing multi languages on resumes. Um, the only negative that I could think of that would come up would be potentially um, is is there a potential language barrier? And so if English is not your primary language, um, if your primary language is Spanish, it could be an issue. Um, but I would say more often than not, it's a benefit to have multiple languages.
right.
So almost always.
Yeah,
If you're not proficient in English, it'll become rapidly evident.
Exactly. Yep. And
yeah,
that'll come out in the interview process. So
yeah. That's all the questions I see. Thank you everyone for calling in. I do want to give one quick piece of advice before we go. Probably the best advice I was given by, I believe it was Dr. Stressall at UCF, who taught senior design and still does. That when you apply for jobs, make sure you copy down the requisition that you applied for somewhere. You can just save the HTML file, put it in a folder, put a copy of the resume you worked on for that application in that folder, because it might be 3 or 4 months before they give you a call back. You never know. That has come in handy so many times. I mean, I had hundreds of jobs and resumes because I tailor them all specifically for that job, as best I can at least. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of work, but when you get a call 3 months later for something, it absolutely helps, especially once you get a job and you start tailoring much more. You have completely different paragraphs for what you used to do to go to the jobs you want to go to. So that's definitely something to think about. They're not going to call you back within the week, especially if it's
Right.
for a professional job. I know someone that interviewed at the same time as me and got a call back about 3 months later when a second position opened up. So
yep.
they remember you sometimes, and it's good to be able to pull up that information and know exactly what you just look like you're on top of things. And it'll definitely set you apart when you're the one that can say, "Oh yes, I fit this very well. Here's the exact resume I use." You don't have to worry about mixing things up.
Right, and especially with COVID now, where delays like that are a fact of life.
Yeah, yeah, that'll
Yeah.
definitely help you out a lot.
Yeah. To add on to that, Chris, one of the points that I had down here is when you finish up an interview, always make sure you thank them for their time. Again, understanding that they have a day job outside of interviewing. Be very, very respectful, polite, open yourself up to future interviews, and make sure that if I don't get this position, please consider me for future positions, or if there's going to be future job postings, let me know, and I would love to apply to a position again. Because you never know, you may have nailed the interview all the way up too, but the guy that got the job over you, um, he was a little more polished that day or something, but you were going to be their second choice. And so, a couple months down the road, if they have another position open up or a different requirement, you
Or
can
if the first guy
certainly,
doesn't work out and is let go.
yeah, absolutely. So,
Happens.
Okay, well, it's time to wind down because it's pushing 9 o'clock now.
Yep.
Um, did you have any parting words, Chris? Or
No, I don't see any more questions. So thank you everybody for calling in tonight, and thank you to Walter and Aaron for putting on this workshop for us.
you're welcome.
thank you guys.
Okay, I'm
Thank
going
you.
to shut down the Zoom. Okay,
Yep. Have a good night, everybody.
good night.